Good morning, all you beautiful people out there. Lizzie and I are once again super excited to have you here. Welcome to our podcast. It is a pleasure and a privilege to be able to talk to whomever is tuning in. Today, we want to talk about relationships that we stayed in that probably were toxic, because obviously that's our topic. We have these toxic relationships, but we stayed even though we knew it was a toxic relationship, even though we were suffering. You might have even known your children were suffering and you stayed. And why? Why'd you stay? Because it's so easy for someone on the outside to say, oh, okay, it's a bad relationship. You're suffering. Your kids might be suffering. Why don't you just leave? Like, are you stupid? I've heard that comment so many times. And, we want to talk about that because we both stayed for a very long time through very, very toxic and awful relationships. And, we've asked ourselves that same question. And we've also had to have some real hard conversations with our children. So Lizzie's got a great mindset on this. And she's real honest and raw. And I'm really excited for you guys to hear what she has to say. So take it away, Lizzie.
Thank you, Dina. As always, it's such an honor and a pleasure to be able to be transparent with whoever's listening and maybe dealing with their own journey of healing through trauma. For those of you that don't know and listen to any of our other podcasts, we were both married to the same person, but not at the same time. Dina was the first wife to my second husband, and so she had children with him. I was married previously. I experienced and journeyed through a lot of abuse, a lot of religious abuse, verbal, emotional, and those will be definitely topics as we move forward. But this one is the impact of those types of guilt when that may have resulted to your children. I think every parent that's listening understands and knows and can feel guilt because we've done something where we couldn't be there to support them at a ball game. They went to school without a lunch. I mean, we all have those types of guilt. So I'm talking about the guilt of staying in a situation that was very abusive, for everyone involved. And a lot of times the purpose of staying was because you had children with this person. And you don't want your children to be raised in two separate households. You believe that marriage is for life. You made a lifetime commitment. And you know the value that kids have, both parents living under the same roof. I was blessed with that. I know that there may be a lot of listeners that wasn't, and I can understand that. But I wanted to offer that to my own children. So with the years of different types of abuse, some of the situations that I can share would be for like religious aspects of it. My first husband was really into following the Old Testament laws. Now, if your culture, your faith, like the Jewish culture, you do follow the Old Testament, but that was not my upbringing. I was brought up, that Christ first, but I love the Old Testament. I don't believe I need to live by the Old Testament. And my children, the impact that it had on my children was the fact that they couldn't go out and play with other kids on Saturdays. They couldn't say certain words because they thought it revered like Greek gods and things like that. They couldn't acknowledge Christmas. They couldn't acknowledge birthdays. They couldn't acknowledge anything. And I would go to work purposely on Saturdays. I used to work for my sister's company. So I'd go to work knowing that my kids were home in this type of environment because I felt like, well, at least they're being taken care of by their dad. And then come to find out later on that maybe they didn't eat for 3 hours while they were really, really hungry because they had to listen to their dad preach at them. They couldn't watch any TV. They couldn't really even talk that much unless it was in agreement to what their dad was saying. So it was really tough when I heard that. And so I remember I was having kind of a I would say, a disagreement with their father. And I just shut down. I didn't show any emotion. I didn't show any excitement. I didn't let him see that he was making me cry or making me want to throw something. And when he walked away, my oldest son looked at me and he said, "That's what you have to do, Mom. You just can't say anything. That's what we do."
Oh, Lizzie, that's so hard. And
Yeah. And that was
God bless
like
you for
one of
sharing that.
many.
It's
Yeah,
hard.
that was one of many. I just kind of want to give everybody a little view of what they suffered, And I remember at the time when it was finally over, I finally was able to kind of get this person out the door. And not only was I wounded, my kids were wounded. And not because it was going to be a broken home, but because of all the things that they were fed emotionally. And they were also probably denied as a child. And, I remember I took me and my 4 boys to a counseling session, and the therapist talked to each one of us individually. And at the end, he talked to me and he said, "You know what?" He said, "I need you to understand your kids are going to do better, but first you have to focus on you." When a plane goes down, a lot of us have heard it, but when you hear it in that really like raw moment, if a plane is starting to go down or the cabin pressure is going off, what's the thing they tell you to do? You put the mask over yourself before you put it over the child. He said, "I'm more interested in needing to meet with you so that we can get the oxygen mask on you." So with that, I through probably about a lot of years of healing and dealing with past guilt. At the time, I didn't realize it was guilt. The children that had probably impacted the most were my 2 oldest children, from that person. And then I was single for like 10 years, got remarried, thinking I met Prince Charming. We're on the same page. He's swooping in, wanting to take care of me. And
This was my ex, by the way, the Prince Charming she's talking about. We were married 26 years, and then, as if you've heard our story, he lied to Lizzie and said you and I were divorced for 2 years when we weren't even divorced yet. He swooped right in and yep. Anyway, go ahead. Go ahead, Lizzie.
oh, he definitely had the right words to say. So, the first wounded soldier moved out, I think, within months of my marriage. Didn't realize it. I thought he was just refusing to, you know, follow my rules or whatever else, or our
In other words, your
rules.
child moved
My
out
child,
once
yeah,
once
my
you
child
married
moved
this
out.
new Prince Charming
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
kid's like, nope, and they move out.
Yeah, and then he ended up being transferred out of state, and so me and 3 of the boys went with him, and then we ended up moving after that to Pennsylvania. And each time we'd lose one of the children, it was kind of like his joke of saying, "Oh, yeah, every time we move, we're getting rid of furniture and kids." Um, at that time, I thought it was kind of funny, but looking back, I think they were feeling abandoned, right? And then, there was an instance when I found everything came to fruition, and I realized that he was leading the double life, and I refused to talk to him because to me, I'm like, I'm one that I sever, especially if you don't have kids together. I didn't stay in that marriage. I didn't feel like after going through 14 years with my first one, I didn't feel like I had any biblical reason I needed to stay. And I thought it was a lot
For
worse.
6 years.
Yeah, we were
I mean,
together.
still enough time for damage to occur.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then after that, he went to my youngest son's house and pretty much tried to manipulate and bully him because I wouldn't talk to him. And there was just a lot of other little things that kind of came up after that. But at the end, I realized that my kids had felt that I had abandoned them and picked him over them. And I could see why, because they were still young, in their own way. And they probably hadn't even dealt with.
At the time, you didn't know it.
No, I didn't know it. No, I didn't know it at all. So watching each of them kind of go through this, and then I'm a hot mess. And so as I move out of state again to be with my mom, I think my youngest felt I had abandoned him physically, even though he had his own place. And the more I healed, the more guilt I felt.
Mm.
Because when you're out of those situations, you really see the brokenness. When you turn around, it's like it's just you see the devastation all over the place. And then you see the devastation in your own children's lives. And my kids were like splattered all over the US. I wasn't even in the same state with my kids anymore, which is huge when you have 4 kids. You think you'd at least be near one, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you
Yeah.
basically lost, that was you and your boys were together for 10 years, just the 5 of you. And now, you're with this new person and the boys are scattering. And you didn't know, I'm sure, at the time, because I, you know, totally understand how that goes with this Rex person. He can easily twist things to make it sound like this kid is annoying or this kid just needs to go and this kid's a problem. And he would do that. He would downgrade, the children and even his own biological children, same exact thing.
Yeah.
Is why they were problematic. And, he was always in a bad mood because of them. And so it made it look like, okay, yeah, this kid's old enough and they're mouthy and they need to go.
It's easy to let go, right? Because you think,
well, yeah, because you're like, okay, it's time for you to go. You're an adult and you're misbehaving and you're doing these things, but you just don't see what's going on under the surface.
Yeah.
And that this husband wants these kids gone.
And then when I was told that I was picking my kids over him was really kind of laughable when I followed him across the US and we were living just me and him together. Yeah. So
I had so many moments with him where, and again, these are his 4 children, his own biological children. They were young. They weren't even, maybe the older 2 were very young teenagers, maybe 15, 13. Then the other 2 were like 11 and 9. And in front of the kids, he would look at them and say, it's them or me. It is them or me. Either they go or I go. Oh, what, I'm going to send them to foster care or something? They're just,
you didn't mean that to be funny, but that was kind of funny.
I know. It's like he would do this in front of them and to them, and
well, that's mean.
It was horrible. Like I just, and it was just a scare tactic really to get me to, comply with whatever it was that he was demanding, but his demands were ridiculous. Yes, your 15-year-old is probably going to be a little bit problematic. Still a great kid, by the way. They were great kids, and they were always tiptoeing around and trying to avoid his mood swings, his anger, and then just to turn around because the kid doesn't respect you and they try, but you can tell that they don't. And now you're mad because they're not respecting you, and to say, well, they're going to leave. Finally, one day, I finally just got enough guts because I was just so beaten down. But finally, thank God, I just said, it's you. It will not be the kids. It's you. And that's when he finally quit threatening. He never said it again because it didn't work anymore.
Yeah.
Anyway, carry on.
That's probably why it wasn't said to me. It's either you or the kids or me and the kids. So yeah, but it got manipulated that way, right? So over time, the boys didn't really, some of the boys still had some hurts, deep wounded hurts. And so it kind of put a wedge in our relationship. And I knew it. I felt it. How do you fix something when you're not talking about it yet? When you're not working on it together? Or, it's not been revealed to you. So finally, 2 of my 4 boys kind of opened their hearts. They shared everything. I wasn't surprised by any stretch of the imagination. And at that point, I also felt like that they they needed that safe place. I was glad they had that safe place to share their hearts and their hurts and how they felt towards me. And then when it was all done, I thought, will this mend? And will we ever be able to work on this together? Well, is this the end? So I would say that we have grown closer through time, through talking about it. I let each of my boys pretty much say what they needed to say and how I may have hurted them. Sorry, how I might have hurt them. But that was it. At that point, it wasn't something that we're going to keep rehashing all the time. Like, I felt like at that point, I was free to say, I am so sorry that I hurt you. I'm so sorry you felt this way. And I can't change the past. All I can do is work on the future and our relationship in the future. And I hope I never do anything like that again that makes you feel like you are being abandoned, because that was like a huge guilt of mine. And that still impacts me to this day. So the fear of leaving my kids when they may have need me, right? Even though they're all adults, it's still a fear because I know the impact that my decisions had in the past. I know the impact and the hurt that it caused them. And even though they're adults now, I don't want to do that again. So it definitely still kind of impacts me, even though I feel like we've made we've really built this good relationship.
Yeah, because you were living with 3 of those boys for the past several years now. And, you really had a lot of great opportunity to talk and to, hash things out as you described, and to tell them how sorry you were, for the things that, because they would relay experiences to you, right? And how those experiences made you feel, because they can't go to their dad, like he's not in the picture. You can't go to him and say, you put mom through hell, and and we're mad at you, so you're the one, you're the one that they have to go to get this stuff off their chest. And I'm sure that was very painful to hear that.
It was really painful. I think that I think you and I talked about it. I felt really, I did feel really broken, I think, for a couple of months, very raw.
Because sometimes you don't really realize, you know what I mean? I mean, I know we've talked about this, and the same with me. I really thought I did a good job of sheltering the kids, from the worst of their dad. And you try so hard as a mom to just be the buffer. But then you realize these kids are a lot smarter than we get them credit for. And like you said, they've gone through things when we weren't home that we just didn't know, because to them, that was just normal life. But that had to be, I can't even imagine, Lizzie, that confrontation that had to be.
It was rough.
Gut-wrenching.
It was rough. It was, I was pretty broken, but they were broken too. They were really broken too. And so, like I said, all I could say is I'm so sorry you felt that way, and I'm sorry I did that. What can I do today? How can I make sure, make sure that you feel safe moving forward? Knowing also they're adults, but
the adult is still the inner child. You know what I mean? I mean, if they haven't ever processed the stuff that happened in their childhood, then that stuff will stay there. So no matter how old you are, and I'm telling you out there, I don't care how old you are, if you're 80 and you have not ever processed or talked about some of the trauma you went through, it will free you. You need to.
100% agree. And, and then how do you move forward? And that's a process in itself, right?
Well, that's what I was going to say, like, we talked about this before the podcast, like, how do you forgive yourself? Because you said, Lizzie, that you still feel guilty, for a lot of these things. And even though you've had the conversation with the kids and, you guys have aired it all out, and, how do you forgive yourself?
I think for me, it's literally like laying it at God's feet almost on a daily basis, or when it comes up, And some days are obviously easier than others. And then starting a new relationship, that guilt kind of comes back. You think you're fine. You think you've worked through everything. And then you're in a relationship and then you're like, oh, I'm afraid I'm abandoning them again, because the last thing you want to do is hurt them again.
So it's like being in this next relationship that you're in now, it's almost like it's triggered these fears that, now it's not you and the boys.
Yeah.
Which, it was for that 10 years after your first marriage. And then after you left the second marriage, it was you and the boys for several years.
Right.
And now there's somebody coming in again. And so I can only imagine this terrifying feeling that, and I'm sure the boys are feeling that too.
And rightly so.
Yeah. They really don't know what's going to happen. And even if they're adults, I mean, they still want their mother to be in their life and not consumed with somebody who is toxic and
right. Or try to pull them away for, for them when they need me or when I just need to be there, whatever that may look like. Right.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, no, it's almost to a point. I think I've had moments and windows where I'm like, I don't think I can do this another relationship. Like, it's been that crippling at times.
Wow.
I'm not saying it's right. I'm not justifying it. I'm just saying those are the emotions that sometimes take control. And I don't know how people do it without God. Because at least I know where I can go when I feel like, oh yeah, I need to take this to God. I need to take this to the Lord. And Hebrews 22 tells us, let us draw near to God with a sincere heart and with the full assurance that faith brings, having our hearts sprinkled to cleanse us from a guilty conscience and having our bodies washed with pure water. Sometimes those things are my prayers. It doesn't mean that they're not going to pop up again. Give grace to myself that ultimately I am forgiven by God. I know that God loves my children more than I do or ever will. And just daily reminders just to kind of let them go, but also be aware of things that could come in and cause that separation and not be blinded by maybe the warning signs that could be there.
Yeah, that's wise. And what do you think some of the warning signs would be? Let's say somebody listening they're going into a new relationship and their kids are kind of freaking out, which is normal, by the way. Don't ever leave a relationship just because your kids are freaking out. Unless this person is, has signs that they want your kids out. They don't want your kids around. They get annoyed when they're around. They're always kind of downplaying or, saying negative things about your children. That's not good. But, just the fact that your kids don't want that person around, super normal. There's an amazing book called The Smart Step Family, which saved me in my blended relationship, my second relationship. I didn't know how to handle all the emotions that were happening from my kids and his kids. So
that's a good reminder.
So what are some of those things, Lizzie?
Well, I would say sometimes you have those red flags, right? I think it's okay to say I need to go slow. I think giving your children the time to adjust, even if it means I think taking them out on dates is really nice. You don't have to call it a date, but you're giving them that specific time that you're going to spend time with them because they are valuable, and just let them know, how much you love them, how proud of them you are, and how glad you are that they are your child. And I think they do need to see you kind of go through things slow if they can, so they don't worry about their concerns and their fears and their whatever they may be. I think that's one way to know. And if you have continual warning signs or red flags, you need to listen.
Yeah. Or if your kids have, warning signs or red flags, which again, kids are kids, and depending on the age, they can be very dramatic. So they can actually think that they're seeing, red flags or warning signs that this person is just like your ex, or this person is going to be a bad person and their dad is great and this new stepdad is terrible, or stepmom. They're going to do that because kids they don't like that kind of change in the security, especially if they had you to themselves for a little while. It's really hard on the kids, but I agree with you, Lizzie. And I think that one thing that made our blended relationship successful is that I finally realized, and it took a long time for my husband and I, my current husband and I, to realize that our kids needed us, our alone time, just like you said. We kept trying to blend everybody, which is good. You should blend everybody. We should have big family Christmases and do family vacations if you can, and just do fun things to try to get all the kids to hang out together. And the longer that they do, the more things settle out. But within that, your kids and his kids desperately need one-on-one time with you. They need to still feel that you are their mom or their dad and you're connected with just them, and you want just that time. Or if you have a big group of kids, if you have 4 or 3, or take all of them out. You don't have to take the stepkids out with your kids too. It doesn't, that's what we kept thinking, and that's what we kept trying to do. We can't take our kids out without taking the other kids out. That would be awful and unfair, and we're trying to blend. No, your kids desperately need time with you. And even though it's been 10 years that I've been in this relationship, my kids still, they want time with mom. Believe me, they love their stepdad to pieces. Like, he is dad, but they still want time with mom. And, my husband's kids still desperately want and need time with just dad. And I learned to not be offended by that or hurt by that, because it's nothing personal. They want him around. Trust me, they want my husband around because he's the grandpa that they adore, but they still need that time. So just be okay with that.
And don't think because they're adults that they should be able to just work through it, because that's a lie too.
That's exactly right. Because they will, as adults, they will find other avenues, to get their needs met, but you don't want that.
Yeah. And then, you don't need to build more walls. And then grandkids come along and you can't be around them because there's hurt and pain. And you also have to let go if they don't forgive and they continue to want to make you feel guilty. And that's a different step. That's a process, right? It's that I still love you, but I can't continually own the same event over and over and over. You are continually trying to make me feel guilty. I can only change, go back to, I can only change starting now, since we had this conversation.
Exactly. And I love that, Lizzie. Like, if your kids just keep browbeating you with what, how you failed and what you did wrong in the past, if you have fully owned it. Now, sometimes kids will do that because you haven't fully owned their pain. You're like, look, you were fine, or you have no idea what I went through, or, it wasn't as bad as you said. No, I don't remember it that way. You guys, you can't do that. Even if it's true, even if it's a perceived hurt, and you really in your heart are pretty darn sure that they've exaggerated it and it did not happen that way, their perception is their reality. So sometimes a kid will browbeat you over and over because they desperately need to heal, and they need you to hear them and to acknowledge what they're going through. And if that's the case, listen, it's better just to own it and just say, I don't remember it that way, but I am so sorry that you're hurting. I would never, ever purposely hurt you. I'm your mother. I'm your father. I adore you. And own it, because that's the only way they can get healing, is they need somebody, to step alongside them for that. But like Lizzie said, once you come out and you acknowledge, you let them empty out, you let them talk about everything. Yeah. Once that happens, unless it's a new situation that maybe they just remembered and they need to talk it out, that's fair. But once that all comes out, you guys, you need to just say, listen, I can't keep paying for this over and over again. I have to move forward. You have to move forward. You're going to have to find your own healing, even though this was a good start, that I can tell you how sorry I am for it, but I can't take it away. And you have to walk your own healing, just like I have to walk mine.
Yeah.
And that's the best you can do, because like you said, you'll never stop feeling guilty if somebody is holding you by the neck and choking you all the time.
And I will say too, if you believe in the Lord and you are a child listening to this and you are angry and hurt by your parents or your mother's, lack of, feeling like whatever, like you feel like they're not listening to you or they didn't listen to you. I've seen, we're kind of like on this trend. I wasn't going to go here, but I'm going to. I've seen it all across the board where kids are cutting off their Christian parents or their parents, and they're angry at them. But yet they've had this conversation with their parents, and their parents I felt like I was listening to them. I felt like I was validating, and they don't want anything to do with that parent. Then it's a whole new set of grief. So this message is for those children. Now, I understand if your parent is abusive. I understand if there's some severe reasons I would understand to cut them off or just be very cautious and have healthy boundaries. But I'm seeing a lot of really broken, especially women. I would say women. I know there's men out there too. I've seen it where they have had these conversations with their children, and that children still refuses. They still want to keep going back to that same instance. If this is you and you are someone who claims to love the Lord, you have to forgive and ask, as my healthy boundary because I want them to pay? Or is it because I'm truly have a parent that is abusive? Because I really think that if you continue down this path, you will separate yourself more and more from glorifying God. And we know that the Bible talks about honoring your father and mother. The beautiful thing is you are an adult. You can set your home up the way you want to set it, but don't try to be mean and make your parents suffer for all the choices they've made, because they have enough guilt as it is.
Well,
anyway, yeah, thank you for listening.
For those of you, go ahead. Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
For those of you that aren't a faith-based person, we still want you on this podcast 100%. We want everybody to be here. If you're not, obviously there's not anything in the Bible that you're trying to obey, but, I know you've heard it before, and I'm going to say it again. Unforgiveness is like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. Or is it they drink poison and you? No, yeah, it's that. Because you're poisoning yourself with those feelings. You're poisoning yourself, with that toxicity that it just keeps, it's just obsessive, it can just really get obsessive. And that person, especially if they're not a good person, they are not paying for what they did in any way, most likely. A lot of people who cause severe degrees of pain, they feel zero pain themselves. So, you being angry and holding it against them or even berating them or belittling them is not going to do anything for you and for your own healing. So you've got to heal. You have to heal. But like Lizzie said, if you have a parent, whether they're faith-based or claim they're faith-based or not, if they are a toxic person and they keep going around hurting people and making just bad decisions, or, making you feel like garbage every time you're around them, you're all happy and you're in a good mood and you're happy to see them and you miss them. And then in a day or two, you just feel like a zero, like they just have subtle ways of making you feel like garbage, or they're angry, they're moody, whatever it could be. If they're a person that you do not get life and breath by being around them, forgive them, but it doesn't mean you have to have a relationship with them. Okay. Those are two very different things. You forgive them, and you either, like Lizzie said, put up big, strong boundaries where maybe you only talk on the phone, or maybe you only see them every now and then, or maybe you keep your visits very short, or you don't see them at all because they're causing harm and damage to you and your kids.
So as we kind of just talked about guilt, whether you're a victim of it as the person that may have caused the pain, or the child or the victim who was deeply hurt by a parent's lack of response or the way they handled something. Bottom line, guilt is very destructive long term. And we want to see each and every person come to a full measure of healing. And I think part of the healing is letting go your guilt and forgiving yourself, as Dina said. So,
but how do we do that? How do we forgive ourselves? I think that it's more of a choice than a feeling. I think that forgiving yourself is, again, Lizzie and I were talking about this, AAA. Oh my gosh. AA.
I like AAA too.
Oh, I'm saying AAA. Okay. AA, Alcoholics Anonymous. One of the steps for you to get free, which, AA and NA and all those other associations are really big on getting a person whole, because they are addicted for a reason. Okay. So one of the steps is forgiveness, and making amends, because you just can't move forward with any aspect of health, mental health at all, until this happens, you guys. It is absolutely massive to your own mental wellness, believe it or not. So with AA, you make amends just like Lizzie did. And you go to those people that you feel you have hurt, and you can write a letter if you want. And even if somebody passed away, and you felt like you hurt them, you can write them a letter and you can read it to them. But you can also give a letter to your children explaining, or talk to them face to face. But once that happens, you literally have to remember that it's gone. And even if you want to, put it all in a little helium balloon, make little notes and put them all in the helium balloon and let it go. And once it goes, it's no longer yours. You cannot beat yourself up for it. And if you are a faith-based person, if you are a Christian or any other faith-based belief, then, we know that forgiveness is exactly what it was given to us as a gift. And once we're forgiven, even God doesn't hold it against us. Like, it's gone. And the Bible says, as far as the east is from the west, is how much your forgiveness is far apart. So it's infinite. Okay. So to me, it's an act of the will, because your emotions will come back. They'll come back. Something will happen, or maybe the kids will say something and that stab will happen and you're going to feel it all over again. But you have to just say, no, it's done. Don't let those thoughts creep in and tell you that you're a terrible person, or you made terrible choices, or that's still who you are. Because I guarantee anybody who's been through something like this, when the years go by, if you've done some homework, you're not that same person anymore. You would probably never do the thing you did back then again. Mm-hmm. You would be wiser. You would have grown, and you have a much better handle on right from wrong. Mm-hmm. And so you're not that same person. So forgive that person back then. She just had no idea. She was so lost, and she was so bruised, and she was so blinded. Mm-hmm. Forgive that person. For those of you who have friends or family that are in these situations, please understand that. Be there to support them. Let them vent, let them air out, but try not to, definitely encourage them to leave if you think that's the right thing to do. And if they're in immediate danger, go get them physically and take them from the situation. But other than that, it usually takes someone quite a while to really come to their own awareness that this situation is not going to change and it's not going to get better. Meanwhile, they just need people around them that love them and support them and don't make them feel stupid for staying, because it is very confusing. And Lizzie stayed in her relationship that was super toxic. I stayed in my relationship for 26 years. That was extremely toxic too. And I look back now and go, that was the stupidest thing. Like, it was so obvious that I should not have been there. But that wasn't her. I wasn't who I am now.
And just as a reminder, if you haven't heard other times that this was said, a person will leave someone 7 times before they're finally done, when it's an average, very right? abusive relationship. Yes. So it's probably, especially if you have children together or whatever else. So yeah, like, you just have to watch and walk beside them. And like Dina said, if someone is in immediate danger, you need to call 911, and you need to, if you can, say, I'm coming to get you. But yeah, that's very critical, because 3 people die a day from domestic violence. So, there's just a lot here, and then they'll suffer guilt the guilt will heap on them later, and they don't need a support system that's going to add to that guilt. So just walk beside them, pray, and pray for protection over their children as well.
Yeah. And keep feeding them the truth. That's what helped me. Thankfully, my mom was always listening to me, and some other key people in my life always listened to me and supported me. And they just kept feeding me the truth. They kept feeding it to me. And it took me a while to grow into my own understanding of that truth, a long while, because the person that I was with was so convincing otherwise. And I loved him. I loved our family. I loved that we had a family. We took years to create this family, and I really believed truly that it was going to get better. I would see even signs of it getting better, and there were signs of it getting better. But the biggest issues in the relationship that were throwing the relationship down the drain were not getting better. He would just outwardly produce some signs of things that, were important to me and make me think he was getting better. Like he would go to counseling with me, or go to church with me, or, try to just be a nicer person or whatever. Just, it made me think things were getting better, but it was just all a facade. But I didn't know. I didn't know at the time.
Mm-hmm. Well, we appreciate you guys listening. Thank you so much. And please leave us comments. Feel free to reach out to us because we would love to hear from you. And we value your time. Thank you.
We do. Thank you so much.